Welcome everybody to this webinar, Optimizing Multi-Project Resource Allocation for Maximum Profitability. Before I start, I have to tell you something. I was visiting a webinar at the Northeastern University where Steve was giving a presentation, and after the presentation, after 45 minutes, we were allowed to ask some questions. I asked one question, and the answer of Steve was absolutely true, and that was the start of our friendship, Steve. I really love it. We have worked a lot in the last few months. I'm fascinated about what you developed, and this is, I will show you my picture. So, by the way, this is Steve in Dublin, but you can tell about that. But before we start and let's do Steve the talking, I would like to show you the books. Steve, you can focus on that also. I'm going to give you the floor, Steve, and as I have to do the navigation of the presentation, but you will just say next, and I will do what you ask. Steve, welcome.
And thank you so much, Jan Willem.
The floor is yours.
It's a pleasure to be here. And as you say, it was that Northeastern webinar, two Northeastern webinars, as a matter of fact, that I did back in December and January through the very kind invitation of Dr. Jacques Alexis of Northeastern University's project management program. And so I'm very grateful to him. And during the second one, you and I met each other and we started discussing some things about various metrics that I've developed. In fact, the one we're going to be discussing today is the DIPP, which is the first metric I ever developed. But the one for which I'm probably best known is critical path drag. And we talked a little bit about that, but that ultimately led us on to talking about the DIPP, which I happen to believe is perhaps or will in the future be the most important of the metrics that I developed. So next, Jan Willem, and I'll start talking a little bit about it. And please interrupt me any point you want to ask any questions.
Steve, welcome. As I already told you, a few months ago, I visited a webinar, and which were you presenting. And because of a question of me, your answer was absolutely true, and this was the start of our friendship. So I'm very happy to have you here and to discuss about techniques you developed. So I hand over the story to you with the first question. How did you start to develop your techniques? Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jan Willem. Well, okay, let me start by saying that I come to project management, which I have been involved with for 36 or more years. I say or more because before getting into real project management, I had the title of project management at Citicorp. And I was responsible for developing, a project manager, developing courses to teach about banking software. And I knew nothing really about project management. The good news is no one that I was working with did either. So they couldn't decide that I was an incompetent project manager. However, not long after that, 36 years ago, I went to work for a company that made project management software. And they hired me because they wanted someone to develop a course in the theory and practice that underlay their software. And they've hired me because I had this title as an instructional designer and as a project manager. And I knew nothing about project management. The first 2 hours on the job, they gave me a little computer-based training module about work breakdown structures and critical path method. I learned more about project management in those 2 hours than I had learned in the previous several years working as a project manager with Citicorp. And so, you know, I fell in love with it, and it's what I've been doing since. I learned how project management worked, or how our software worked, and I went around teaching it to companies all over the United States, Ford and Rockwell International and so on, for several years. And then one day I had an idea. The idea was because I had played in a backgammon tournament. And the backgammon tournament, I'm a gamester, a chess, poker, backgammon. And in the backgammon tournament, as I was driving to work the next day, I realized that there's a moment in backgammon where you have to decide whether you want to play for double the stake or you want to what's called drop, give up the stake you've been playing for. And there's a way of analyzing that. And right before that, I'd been reading a number of articles about when you should cancel a project or abort it, or when you should keep going. And it dawned on me that the two things were very similar. And so I sat down and I put together a paper on when you should cancel and when you should keep funding a project. I showed it to some consultants and they said they'd never seen anything else like it for a while. And so I sent it on to Project Management Journal, and the editors at Project Management Journal sent it out to a couple of referees, and they came back saying, I expected them to say, this is nonsense, everyone knows this already. Instead of which they came back saying, this is fascinating new material. You should make this a featured article. And the result of that was they published it in September, October issue of 1992 of Project Management Journal. And that was my first article about anything in project management theory. It was called When the Dip Dips, a decision, a key to decision, an index for decisions on projects. Okay. And the dip stands for, I wouldn't have called that now, but it stood for DeVoe's Index of Project Performance. And this, after all these years later, is what has triggered the interest of Jan Willem Tromp. And so we are now using it in cooperation, in conjunction with the new methods and techniques of AI. So I'll talk a little bit about the DIPP and then about how it can work with AI.
Yeah.
So okay. If you have a question, or if we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, let's go.
So here's the thing. What we're talking about is multi-project resource allocation, which is a very difficult and a very difficult problem, and one which can provide a great deal, I think, of value. And ultimately, one of the things that can guide AI is the DIPP, which is an index that tells us how good a project is being performed, how well it's being performed. Okay. The purpose I maintain of every project is that it's an investment. We put money in, we pay for resources in order to produce a product, service, or outcome which we expect to have more value than the cost that we sank into resources. That value will come later on. That's a classic case, an example of a project. All projects are like that. But how do we allocate resources and budgets across projects? And that's what we need to look at. In order to do that, we need to know what do we want from our projects. And what we want from our projects is we want the scope of the project to give us value. How can we make sure we're optimizing the value of that scope? What would an AI system that will do that for us need? I would maintain that it needs specific metrics. What is the DIPP? The DIPP is a metric, and I'll explain in a moment how it would work to tell an AI system or an individual or a company what the value of their project is going to be. What would be the benefits of such an AI system? It would allow us to plan and schedule all the projects in our multi-project portfolio on the basis of what will give the greatest value, not just to any individual project, but to the portfolio as a whole.
Yeah.
Next question. Okay. So the truth is, project variables are simple. In fact, I would maintain that project variables are simpler than a hand of poker. A good friend of mine was world champion of poker, and I'm sure, in every poker hand that he plays, he does more cost-benefit analysis and predicting of what might happen, which of his opponents might raise, which might drop his raise, on the basis in every poker hand. In a project, we really only have 4 variables. They are the scope that we're doing, that we hope to provide us with value, the cost of the resources it's going to require to obtain that value, the time it's going to take, which can affect both scope and cost, and risk, which can affect any one of these 4 sides. Now, what we'd like to do is take these four variables and put them together, integrate them in such a way that we have a single metric that tells us which of these 4 sides, which of their interactions will give us the most value of scope minus the cost, which we can call profit or ROI, or the term that I like to use on projects, which is expected monetary value, the value we expect to come from our project if we meet our goals of time, cost, risk, or scope. Okay. Now, good project managers, of course, are managing these 4 variables anyway. But to manage an investment, we need those integrated metrics across variables, and we need quantification that is based on ROI, or expected monetary value, or expected project profit. Any of those terms work. Next, yep. We need, therefore, a prime metric which integrates all of these, and which we can plan and track, reflecting the interactions of those 4 variables in integration. And secondly, we need techniques and computations for each of those variables that can help us improve our expected monetary value, or ROI.
But
any questions yet?
Yeah, Steve. Basically, what you are saying, if I understand you well, the DIPP is a metric for those 4 variables to maximize the ROI of your whole portfolio.
Correct. Exactly. It's reducing the interactions of these 4 sides to a specific number, and that number is reflective of what value we expect to get out of the project if we meet, or perhaps do better.
Let's go into it, Steve.
Okay. So the DIPP, first of all, at the bottom there, it points out that when the DIPP dips, P&L Index for Project Decisions was published in Project Management Journal in 1992. And at the bottom of this, I believe we're going to make these slides available to folks. Yeah. And there's an article there from Western Carolina University, or a PDF that you can get of this article. The DIPP, as originally conceived, as I say, I would use different terms and names perhaps now, though I would use exactly the same variables. The DIPP is the total project contribution margin, or if you will, the expected monetary value of the scope, minus opportunity cost, that's OC, minus what I called cannibalization worth. Today I would call it salvage value. In other words, what is the opportunity cost is what are we losing by investing our resources in this project? If we were to put them on another project, what would we gain? Secondly, the cannibalization worth is the salvage value. If we stop the project right now, how much value would it generate anyway? Because if it would generate a lot of value anyway, then that mitigates against continuing to pay to complete the project. And then this is divided by the cost estimate to complete, which at the start of the project is the budget, okay, which can be figured out, if you wish, through earned values, a cost performance index, and project it. And then project termination costs. When we cancel a project, it typically, the overall value, the overall cost doesn't stop immediately. We may have to sell a factory. We may have to pay for our workers' unemployment, et cetera, et cetera. So that's information that before we cancel a project, these are the things that we should look at. Now, if we go to the next slide.
One moment. Let me make clear that we will make the presentation available because we see a lot of terms which have an explanation. So don't worry about that. You don't have to make notes. We will provide you with the presentation. Thank you for that, Steve. Please continue.
Sure. If we go to the next slide, we will now see how that original DIPP evolved, because it didn't stay as it was. And the reason is, several years later, I was teaching a course for BAE Systems in Manassas, Virginia. And one of the people in my class, an engineer in space systems named Hugh Miller, after I had explained this, said to me, "Why don't you normalize it?" And that, those terms immediately made so much sense. A light went on as I realized what he was suggesting and how much more useful the DIPP could be. The truth is that we don't, for the most part, on a daily basis, need to deal with opportunity cost, perhaps, or cannibalization worth, or project termination costs. These are things that we need to look at if we're planning to abort the project. But if we're just doing the project, we don't really need those. That's getting a little too much in the weeds. All we need to know is, what is the value of the project going to be, and what is the cost estimate to complete that's going to take us to get that value. So if we go to the next portion here, this led to my coming up with the simple DIPP. The simple DIPP is the expected monetary value of the project divided by the cost estimate to complete, which again, at the start of the project is the budget, but as the project goes on, hopefully the cost estimate to complete will go down. If it doesn't, we've got big problems, right? Yeah. So that's the nature of the simple DIPP. Moving on. So just pointing out, some people will have said to me, but what if the value isn't monetary? Well, you know, you can use the cost is going to be monetary. So we often need to justify that cost by turning whatever value we're getting into monetary units. But there are situations in which people use different types of value. In the military, for instance, I've done a lot of work with the United States Air Force, and they have pointed out that the term they often use is expected mission value. Well, that's a term that applies for military projects. It also applies to a lot of public benefit projects. For instance, what is the value of teaching literacy, making 1,000 students literate? Well, I don't know exactly, but we can certainly quantify it in terms of the 1,000 students. And if we want, we can perhaps turn that into a unit of monetary value also. But even just 1,000 students, if we've done half of them, that's 500. It is a way still of seeing how the project is coming along. Okay, next. Great. Cost estimate to complete starts as the budget. As the project goes forward, the cost estimate to complete should come down as a complement, as the reverse of, well, you will, if you will, or the obverse of the planned cost function, which is simply what in project management terms is planned value. I hate the term planned value because it's really planned cost, but people call it planned value, or it's also called the budgeted cost of work performed. So as the planned value of a project goes up as it goes along, as the cost accumulates, the cost estimate to complete is expected to go down
Yeah.
in the obverse.
Yeah.
And that cost estimate to complete is probably the most important part of earned value management, yet it's often ignored. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, that brings us now to the third evolution, really, of the DIPP, which is the project tracking DIPP. The 4 variables integrated into a single metric allow senior management and the project team and an AI system to track and optimize project progress and decisions about the future of this project's progress. Scope being measured in terms of expected monetary value, cost in terms of the cost estimate to complete, which will go down as the project goes forward, and time. Time is, again, it's an acceleration delay factor. A plus usually for acceleration, or although there are a tiny percentage of exceptions where acceleration doesn't help, and a minus for delay, although again, sometimes there is not much of a decrease in of a project's value due to a delay. There usually is, I would say 99.9% of the time. So let's work towards the 99.9% of occasions when that happens. And risk, which again can affect any of the 4 sides.
Steve, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
We always, so a lot of people talk about late delivery of a project, but you say focus on acceleration because maybe it can increase your revenues, correct?
Correct. There's an article, if anyone wants to look it up, on LinkedIn that I wrote called Steve's Stipulations about the value of acceleration. And there are a whole bunch of reasons why accelerating a project, even if you've been given some artificial deadline, okay, accelerating it can have great value. It can have huge value in certain fields like new product development. Or if you're building a hospital, the sooner you get that hospital finished, the sooner you're going to be saving people's lives.
Yeah.
But ultimately, so time, we often don't think of time as having a value, of acceleration as having a value, but it does. And just to give you one final example, when you finish a project, you retire. When you finish it early, you retire all risk of finishing it late. Yeah. And that in itself is a value.
Is a value, yeah. Okay. We have to look regarding time because we lost 10 minutes, Steve. So please continue.
Moving along. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So all projects are investments, but the great news is that with most investments, investors in a project who know what is happening can take steps to improve the return on their investments. That's not true of other investments. Go buy stock in Microsoft. You have no control over what happens to that Microsoft stock. You do have control over what happens with a project, especially if you understand project management.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's needed is a baseline to plan, track, and improve project performance. So on to the next slide. So here is the baseline for the DIPP Progress Index. The DIPP Progress Index is simply actual DIPP at any point along the way divided by planned DIPP, what we expected the DIPP to be at that point. So if we look here, what we see on the left side is a series, on the y-axis is a series of numbers showing what the DIPP is. And at the bottom, we have time, a 26-week project. And as we look at that time, we see that the project starts with a value, a DIPP of just over 2, okay? But as time goes on and the estimate to complete goes down as we get work done, ultimately, the value of the project over the cost to get that value, which is the cost estimate to complete, becomes greater and greater. If you're working on your project right now and it's nearing finish and the bosses are starting to pull resources away from you to put them on other projects. Oh, we got to get another project going. What you are actually doing is hurting yourself because you're taking resources away from a project which has become extremely valuable. At the end of this project, we are going to be getting back $30, over $30 for every dollar we invest, according to the planned DIPP. We don't want to delay that. Now, as we look here, we will see that at 18 weeks in, the planned DIPP, again, expected monetary value divided by cost estimate to complete, is supposed to be 6.03. What if it's 5.00? That means that the DIPP progress index would be 5.00 divided by 6.03, or 0.83. What is that saying? That is saying, if we click on the button, that is showing us that whether it's because the market has changed, or we've gotten delays, we're running behind schedule, or there have been cost overruns, for whatever reason, for the rest of this project, we are only going to get back 83 cents for every dollar we had planned to get back the rest of the way. Clearly, we're not doing well. But if we're managing the project overall, then ultimately we can see what's going on and make decisions. So maybe we never get to this point. Or if we get to this point, we can do something about it. So if we click one more time, maybe when we get to week 18, we have instead a DIPP of 9.00. In which case, that means we've accelerated the schedule or reduced the cost, or maybe the market has improved, market window has improved, and our DIPP progress index now would be 9.00 divided by 6.03, or 1.49. Think about that. Imagine if every project our organization does has a project team that understands this information and ultimately, therefore, is looking for ways to make the project more valuable. Wouldn't that be awful if organizations did that, if teams did that? And of course, not just a team doing it, but perhaps an artificial intelligence system doing it. AI can add so much to this. Any questions yet?
No, the AI would be a team member. Let's say it this way.
Yes, absolutely.
No, good, great. Let's continue.
Yes. So here we have traditional project management data for a given project. And let us note that for a given project, I'm going to put on my glasses because this is a little hard for me to see. So for a given project, we have a given portfolio. We have 4 projects in our portfolio that we are currently working on. And if an organization is really good and sophisticated and mature, we will have this information. Most of the time, we don't even have this information across our portfolio. So we have the expected monetary value. Somebody in the company must have a sense of what each of these projects is going to be worth. So for A, it's $1 million. For B, it's $2 million. For C, it's $5 million. And D, it's $10 million. And their budgets, $800,000, $1.5 million, etc. Overall, their start expected project profit, which is expected monetary value minus budget, will be 200,000, 500,000, 2 million, and 1.3 million, giving us a total expected project profit across a portfolio of $4 million. Now, our planned completion dates are 1 August, 1 October, etc. If we look at the current completion dates, we can see that we are starting out, we're on schedule, we're planning to finish by those planned completion dates. and our cost estimate to complete, which is our budgets at the start of the project, 200,000, 1 million, 2 million.
Yeah.
Now that's good information, and some of the best organizations might have that. The vast majority don't, and under any circumstances, it's not enough. At this point, I just like to express my appreciation to Mike Hannon of Forteza Consulting, who I gave him some of this information and he enhanced my original slides. So it's really very appreciated. Next slide. Sorry?
I can tell you, Steve, that my customers have this information.
They do. As I say, they should take a bow. They're among the most sophisticated organizations in that case in project management.
Okay, I will tell them. Can we continue?
Yes, please. Okay, now what happens? We decide maybe we would like to do Project E. Project E in the same portfolio, meaning using basically the same resources. And we're going to do it because it's got an expected monetary value of 12 million for a budget of only 3 million. That means it's going to give us $9 million of additional value expected, providing we finish it 10 February.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, we haven't got a current completion date yet, but it's got an estimate to complete. Now, on the next slide, here's what happens. We can see we've got all these projects scheduled, the 4 projects, and what we should have is we should have not only the expected project profit on the left side in the red, but we should have the starting dip, and we should have the planned dip and the current dip. Notice planned dip and current dip are the same. That means we're on schedule. But now, going to the next, well, what we see here is we need to have this category of how much would the project lose for every unit of time we are late? How much would the project gain in value for every unit of time that it's early? And notice these numbers can be different on each project, and being early and being late can be different amounts. This is essential information that should be on every project and is on very, very few. The only places I know where project teams are managing with this information are nuclear power plants and occasionally other types of energy other types of energy industries.
Yeah.
But they're the ones who know what the cost is of time for the most part. Most of the time, this information is not given to project teams, even if it's known. And most of the times, that information is not researched and explored.
The only examples I know is that they get a penalty when they deliver late for every week.
Right, and so there is sometimes a risk of liquidated damages, and that's information. But are projects using that information to develop and work to their schedule? No.
No. Okay. Clear.
Next.
Yeah, this is the bottom line. It's just a calculation of all 4 projects.
Right. The portfolio information. I'm sorry. So this is across all the portfolios, and you'll notice that our planned dip and current dip are 2.9 at this point.
This is an average. This is an average, correct?
This is the total. This is 14 million across a project of budget and 18 million of expected monetary value, which gives us a 2.9.
Thank you. Thank you for clarification.
No, thanks for clarifying. Okay, next slide. Just pointing out again that's because we are on schedule at the moment with all of these projects. But now we're going to toss Project E into the hopper. And there goes Project E. Project E has, notice, a starting dip of 4.0, 12 million divided by 3 million, if we complete it by 10 February. And the cost estimate to complete of 3,000. But notice, the amount that is going to cost us for every week we're late is 20%. And if we're early, it'll add 5%, but 5% of a big number of $12 million. what do we do with this information? We take this project E and we throw it into the hopper in a moment. Notice we haven't developed a schedule yet, but we are told that this project is very deadline driven, deadline sensitive. Okay. We do some research. Project E needs to finish by February 10th. Every week later will ultimately result in a reduction in value about by 20% or 2.6 million. So we're going to need to make sure it's prioritized overall for resource allocation.
Yeah.
And so on our next slide, at the bottom there, we plug it into as the fifth project. We give it all the resources it needs in order to finish February 10th, because we don't want it to be late. And when we do so, we cause bottlenecks on the critical paths of each of the other 4 projects and wind up delaying them. Now look at what happens. Overall, our value of our projects, our return on our investment will go way down. Originally, we were expected to make $18 million of value for 14 million. Now we've added another $3 million of cost, and overall, the value of our individual projects has gone way down. And we can tell that because the DIPP has gone way down. If you look at the column there of the DIPP, which used to be 2.9, it's now down to 2.0. Overall, our value, our expected project profit was 4 million. If you hit the next button. Yep. Okay. So all these projects are now being delayed because of the bottlenecks. The overall project profit, 18 million. It's now 20 million, but we're spending 3 million more to get $2 million more of value because of the delay costs on those 4 projects. And the overall result is that this wonderful new project we brought on board is going to wind up reducing our expected project profit across the entire portfolio by $1 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Next.
This is what reality often sees.
Absolutely.
Oh, you see the current dip. Yeah, you told that. Okay.
Yeah. And one more thing I want to point out. Please notice that Project C, which was giving us a nice 1.7 dip earlier at the start expected, it has fallen because of its delay costs and because of the delays caused by the bottleneck. Its dip has fallen to 0.5. That means for every dollar we spend on Project C in the future, we're going to make back a total of 50 cents. There's clearly something wrong there. If that is all the information, we probably need to cancel it. We should put it through the full dip analysis, project termination costs, opportunity costs, and so on, and see whether perhaps we shouldn't cancel Project C if this is the way we're going to do it. Fortunately, we have another alternative, especially if we have an AI system.
But basically, Stephen, if we are able to make predictions about, because of the bottlenecks, about the new situation, including Project E, this will be the expected delivery dates, correct?
Correct.
And then you can make these calculations.
Exactly. And you can make calculations about which of these projects do we want to give resources to.
Yeah.
Is it more on the basis of what will produce the most portfolio value?
Yeah. Okay.
Next slide. And so what we see here is at the bottom of this, we will have put together, we'll have optimized it. We see that we don't want to delay E, but E also has more value if we accelerate it. It's going to give us 2.6 million I believe, not 2.6 billion, but it's going to give us more value if we speed it up, 5% more for each week. And so ultimately, we give Project E here, and the AI system is able to determine that by giving Project E more of these resources, we actually increase its value and increase the value of the overall product, of the overall portfolio. And then next, okay, that's showing us how we're increasing it. Now, notice that Project C, where the dip had fallen to 0.5, by giving it more resources, by seeing that and realizing we need to give it more resources and come up with the best optimization solution in our resource leveling, we've increased that back to a point where it's well over 1.0 and definitely worth doing, Project C.
Excellent.
And thirdly, we can see that our overall value has increased.
Yeah.
And that our dip has gone back up to 2.6. Now, this is all on the basis of current resources. The next thing that we can do using AI again is, what if we gave this portfolio, if we look at the next, if we click one time, what if we could give it, this portfolio, 500K more for resources, or 1 million more, or whatever we like? How would the AI system assign the resources across this to optimize the dip? Such profit-based resource leveling requires AI, optimized by the portfolio dip. And the last statement I'm going to make, and then we can take questions if you're comfortable with that, is to say, this is not unlike, if anyone out there is a chess player and is familiar with the chess engine, as it's called, Stockfish. This is not unlike Stockfish, where we can look at any move in any given position and see if it improves our position or not. That is what the dip is doing, except it's not doing it for chess games. It's doing it for our project and portfolio value. How do we optimize our resources across a multi-project portfolio?
So basically, you invented the dip in the 90s, but people had to play around, do what-if analysis manually. Now AI gives us the opportunity that you create all the numbers we are seeing here. Yes. And then AI can in the night can play around and say, okay, if I tweak this and tweak this, what will be the impact? At the end, we want to have, let's say, a higher profitability. That's basically what you are doing. So AI gives your technique now in the 20s, a great opportunity. Excellent.
This is what I would compare it to is Leonardo da Vinci invented the parachute back in the late 1400s, I believe it was. And it sat around for years and years. It required the invention of the internal combustion engine and ultimately the Wright brothers. And it wasn't until World War I, really, that a parachute started giving value and saving people's lives. So, I didn't have, the good news is I didn't have to wait 400 years.
No.
I only had to wait about 30 years for you to come along, Jan.
Let's go to the question round because we are still in good shape, 10 minutes. Thank you, Steve, for this explanation. I already see some questions and Helen will now take care of the questions. Helen, can you give the first question, please? I keep the slide deck open because maybe you need it for answering one of the questions. Is that okay? Here it comes. Finishing early incurs extra running cost. You start using the deliverables earlier and a running cost and depreciation. How do you accommodate that?
Sure, that's easy. The question is always should be, what is the increase in cost versus what is the increase in value? If you're increasing the cost by $1 million, but the value is only increasing by $800,000 because of the acceleration premium, then we don't do it. If it's if it's $800,000 and $1 million of additional cost, and you're getting $1.1 million of additional value, it's very possible that that's not worth it either. Because these are all estimates, right? We don't know where we're going to go. This is very, very close. But if people use the correct methods of resource leveling and some of the techniques that I've introduced, such as critical path drag and resource availability drag to optimize schedule, they will see places, Jan Willem, where on their projects, they can add $20,000 worth of additional value on a specific activity on the specific path. And the result will be that they will increase the value of the project by $200,000. When it's 10 times more, you do it. If you can get the additional.
I understand. But regarding time, I have a proposal. Let's discuss this drag story. You're also one of your techniques. Let's discuss this in a webinar somewhere in the fall, and then let's now focus on the dip, because you're going to write an article about it. So let's not go into this article. Will be published hopefully very soon.
Okay.
And I would like to go to the next question. But you're absolutely right. We have to invite you back if you would love to do that, Steven.
Right. You know, every project, again, is an investment. If the amount you have to invest more, you're going to get more value, even more value, then it may be worth it.
Yeah. Okay. Value of money changes over time, especially when inflation is high. How reflects this in the dip? Good question.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that is included in my original article, the time value of money. We have to estimate what is the value of money likely to be in the future. And that's both for our costs, of course, and for our value. So we would do, this is a fairly standard economic analysis, the time value of money, how much $1 million a year from now is not equal to $1 million right now. So if we're going to spend $1 million right now to improve this project, we think, and it's going to give us $1 million of value a year from now, chances are we're losing 2 to 5%.
Yeah. Basically, if you know that inflation is high, like 10% in the last year, right, you know that your cost to completion will go up. So the dip will already show it.
Right. That's called the time value of money.
Yeah,
it's a standard microeconomic factor.
Good question. Thank you. Next question, please. What data is essential to make an informed decision on adding a project to the portfolio?
Okay, that's basically the information I would say that we're showing at the bottom of this slide that's still right up there. What is the value of the portfolio currently, and what is its cost? How much would that change for each of these projects? How much would their value change if they're earlier or later? Then we put a new project in there, add a project to the portfolio. We're going to create, or there's a good chance that we will create, resource bottlenecks that wind up slowing down some of the projects. So where now do we give the resources? This can be incredibly complex, even on a 5-project portfolio.
Yeah.
Imagine if we're dealing with a 50 project or 100 project portfolio. That's when we really need an AI system to do this. But let me observe, an AI system doing this is basically what AI should have been invented for. Going back again to Stockfish, the chess engine, the interesting thing about it is that now the level of play of Stockfish, its rating, is 20% higher than the rating of the greatest chess player that's ever lived, the Norwegian Magnus Carlsen. Stockfish would crush Magnus Carlsen most of the time in a match. And ultimately, this is what it's doing. It's looking at lots of possible variations, and an AI system could look at 1 million different variations over the course of close down on Monday morning and start up on Tuesday, close down Monday afternoon and start up Tuesday morning.
Yeah. Before the next question, I want to tell something, because I already agreed with you that we are going to invest in your techniques in our Epic Flow environment. And what I specifically, the DIP as a concept is not that complicated. The only thing is that those numbers are maybe not easy to get, but this artificial intelligence is really what makes our company interested in it. So I'm really looking forward to develop this together with you. And the first meeting we already have next Tuesday. But thank you for that, for the cooperation, Steve. Let's go to the next question. I think we can overrun a little bit because we started 10 minutes later. How do AI and metrics help mitigate resource management challenges? I love this question, Steve.
Well, it feels like almost you should be the one person answering this. The metrics, but I'll answer simply and then you can add. The metrics, like the DIP, ultimately allow the AI system to crank on data based on the DIP and look for the best dips and the second best dips and the third best dips. My feeling would be that, it should print out, say, the 10 best dips based on its resource allocations of resource allocation profiles across the portfolio. And then the program manager or senior management or whomever can look and see which of these 10 seems to be the most valuable. And if they're choosing number 3, what is the value they're giving up by choosing number 2 or number 1? And why are they doing it? Maybe because the others would be riskier, maybe because we can't get a specific resource at this point in time. What would you say?
Okay, let me add my view on it. For me, portfolio management. So I had a discussion with a friend of mine, Jan Hendrik is his name. He told me, Jan Willem, portfolio management is resource management. And on the moment he said that, it was in our first webinar, I realized this is absolutely true. Now, what we can do is, with this resource management and the portfolio information, we can create new schedules, what can be the delivery date of every project, and we can tweak it. Your DIP is helping us, our AI environment. Hey, focus on that. Try to improve that with let's say the constrained resources, or even with an extra resource. What is the impact of an extra resource? You can do this in your AI model, present it the next day to the portfolio manager and say, hey, I have, let's say 10 what-if scenarios, which are interesting. You have to make a decision. Just look at all the numbers, what has the biggest impact and the one that you like. Because maybe one of the resources, the AI model is saying, increase that by 1, you can't find that person. So you have to go to all the scenarios. This is how I see it. So portfolio management is not only planning, it's also in execution. I'm talking also about the execution part. And instead of having portfolio meetings every 3 months, I think portfolio and execution, you should do this analysis at least once a week.
Absolutely. And at any point when there's a sudden great change.
Yeah, and that can be because a risk is suddenly popping up and has a huge influence on your DIP. So you already know the consequence.
Right.
Absolutely true. It's a dynamic system, and AI is helping us AI is helping us to give us information to make better decisions.
Absolutely.
Shall we finish with one last question, Steve? Okay, can you summarize the signs that a project won't generate profit? Oh, it's an interesting one, Steve.
Well, first of all, one of the things that can affect a project from generating profit is that the market changes. If the market suddenly changes, then your entire value of your project could go down the drain. But a second one is delay costs. ultimately the delays can get to be so great that it's going to cost you more to remember, it's the consideration once you're halfway into a project shouldn't even be any longer, will it make a profit? It should be, will it make it a profit on over and above what we're going to have to spend the rest of the way? It's cost estimate to complete, because we need to factor out the sunk costs, because they are gone. They're at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, whether we finish the project or terminate it.
Yeah.
So that's certainly a huge factor. And the third thing, of course, is if we have a big risk factor built in. Let us say we're counting on this product passing the test, some kind of test we're going to give to it, and it needs to pass that test in week 20. Well, when we give it that test in week 20, we've got this big risk. If it doesn't pass, now what are the implications of that? Can we still recover, or are we better off at that point canceling the project?
Yeah, that I have a question which is related to this. In the current money value, we take, let's say, the revenues we get when we deliver the project. But if you develop a new project, let's say a device which you want to sell somewhere over time, you don't get the full revenues on the first day, but it will increase, hopefully, because of your marketing sales campaigns. What is the number you should use in this case?
I would say that you should use the number of whatever revenues you're going to lose for being a week late and 2 weeks late and a month late. In actual fact, based on the revenues you expected to generate a week and 2 weeks and a month after your project reached market. Remember, in all probability, there is an obsolescent point out there where you're not going to sell anymore.
Yeah.
So by delaying your project, you're getting closer and closer to that obsolescence point. And chances are good that you're not, that any of those amounts that you are losing up front are eventually, you're not going to be able to make them back up. So I would say that if you expect to make $1 million in the first week, 4 million in the second week, 10 million in the third week, that's the value of any of those delays along the line. Delay by 3 weeks, and you're going to lose 1 million plus 4 million plus 10 million is $15 million.
But basically, if you introduce a new product, you have to look at the money value, the money value of the time you think your product will be sold.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And very interesting, because we had a discussion about if you introduce a new product for Christmas time and you do it 2 days before Christmas, then you have lost a lot of money.
That's true. In the case of Christmas, that's absolutely true. But in the case of another product that's just going to have a stream of revenues coming in, the fact that your project is late doesn't stop time. Time is going to continue, and you're getting closer and closer to that point of obsolescence, which we may not know exactly when it is, but we probably should be estimating when it is.
Yeah, okay. Steve, I want to close down. First of all, thank you very much for your explanation. There are a lot of terminology, so we will share your presentation, of course, so people don't worry. We will make sure that you will get it. Your email address is on the front page, so they can always contact you, Steve.
Yep.
I promised you we are going to develop it within Epic Flow. We do that first in our lab environment. I'm really looking forward to this cooperation together with you, starting next Tuesday. And I invite you to organize the next webinar somewhere in October, where we are going to discuss about what is our effective ways to decrease the lead time of projects. I know you have also developed techniques for that.
Yep.
And let's do that later. To all listeners, please do me a favor. If you are a wise man, buy Steve's book. I did. I started reading it. I could not stop reading anymore. And I interviewed Jan van den Berg. Jan van den Berg is also a friend of you, Steve. He's a Dutch guy. I interviewed Jan van den Berg about Steve's concepts, and Jan made me even more enthusiastic. So it's really a fascinating world. In my view, good project schedulers with the right tooling can earn a huge amount of money for companies.
Absolutely. They're not paid nearly enough as they would be paid if it were understood just how much value they can add and cost they can save.
Absolutely. Steve, thank you very much. We had a real start because we had a power shot, but I think we managed. Thank you very much, and hopefully, thank you everybody who attended the webinar. We both hope that you learn from it. Steve's idea is let's just share the knowledge, and that's what we try to do today. Do what you want to do with it in the future. And if you read his book, you will become more enthusiastic because it contains a lot of techniques. And Steve, we are working now on your new article, so we will I'm not saying publish it, but we will make an announcement when your article is published, so that all the attenders can see where they can find it. Okay, with a lot of thank you from the chat box. Steve, have a wonderful day. For me, it's already evening, and we will speak each other for our next step next Tuesday.
Great. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much, John.
Helen, thank you for all the things you did today and all the things you did in the last month. It was a tremendous job. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.